This is going to be great.
All right, people are starting to come in. Wonderful. Hello, folks. This is Linda Warren Seeley. I'm the director of the section of dispute resolution. Welcome today to keynote number 2 on Tuesday. This is online options to resolve issues and cases. Oh, I'm sorry, all online options to resolve issues and drive results. This program is brought to you by Matterhorn, and our presenter is M.J. Cartwright, who is the CEO of Matterhorn. And joining her today is Dunree Greiling, who will be assisting her with troubleshooting and checking the Q&A for answers or for questions. If you will, please be sure to submit your questions through the Q&A button in the Zoom toolbar, and they will have a question and answer period at the end of the program. I also want to remind everybody that this program is being recorded. So you can watch, if you miss something, you can watch it later on after we upload it to the website. And we will start the program in about 2 minutes. Also, please watch the chat. I'm going to provide a link to the hub. And if you have technical issues, there will be a link that you can use to contact Zoom and let them know that you are having problems.
Linda, I'm wondering if I should, it's some of the voice is breaking up for me, if I should do my voice via phone.
Probably be a good idea
Okay.
if you're having problems.
Okay. All right, I want to go in here.
Are you still
Make
at
sure
your
I
lake
write down
house?
the
Is that the issue?
No, she's at home.
Okay.
I just need to make sure I write down the number of the meeting to get in. 1970644. All right.
All right, we'll give you a few minutes to get all that set up.
I think I hear MJ's clock in the background.
At least you don't hear the banging. It seemed to have taken a short break.
Maybe they're on lunch. That would be wonderful.
Yeah,
That would be
I know.
perfectly timed.
I guess I need the meeting ID.
Just your sound is okay.
You can hear me okay? Okay.
Yeah, good enough.
Okay.
All right.
All
you
right.
guys are all breaking up for me, so.
All right. So are you ready?
Go ahead.
All right. Excellent. Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. This is Linda Warren Seeley with the ABA staff. And I want to welcome you to our keynote program, Online Options to Resolve Issues and Drive Results. With us today, we have M.J. Cartwright, who is the CEO of Matterhorn, and to assist her today is Dunree Greiling. So welcome, ladies. Thank you so very much for joining us. If you'll check the chat attendees, there you'll see a link to the hub and then a tech support link also in the chat if you have any problems or issues. We want to encourage you to submit your questions for the presenters anytime during the program using the Q&A button in the Zoom toolbar. There will be a Q&A period at the end of the program. As just a reminder, this program is being recorded and the recording will be posted in the Tech Expo Hub within the next few days. MJ and Dunry, welcome. Many thanks, and you may proceed with the program.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to talk about online dispute resolution and really driving results, which is what this presentation is all about. So let me bring up this and get us started. So I'm going to ask you, and I'll give a few minutes knowing we are doing this in variable bandwidth in people's homes and offices. But I'm going to show you a few slides, and if you can think about what are these people doing? What is she doing? She is, could be working, could be waiting for a message, reading, a briefing, living her life. Here we have someone who is potentially waiting for someone or checking her test scores or checking something from work. We have someone who's trying to get in better light so that she can see something that she's looking at, or taking a picture that she needs to send somebody. People living their lives in all different aspects of it. And we are very used to interacting with our mobile devices in the world. And again, when we're places, this is what we see and really what we expect to see. And also, even without our mobile devices, what are these people doing? They're living their lives, they're taking care of their kids, they're working. In fact, these guys look like they're working quite happily together. I don't know if everyone looks that happy when they're working. And then we have people working in an office just this month. Obviously, paying attention to some of the COVID-19 barriers that we're dealing with, and people outside with it. So these are people who are just living everyday lives. Here we have a group that people that are going to be getting on a bus or a train or an L if they're in Chicago, which that could really be. But all these people are living their lives. And, you know, what has happened with courts and dealing with issues, legal issues, is that when you have to go to the court, you end up in long lines like we have here in Los Angeles. Pre-2020, obviously. Long lines in the South, in Alabama, here's an example. Long lines in New York City, New York. People waiting to deal with their legal obligation in the court system. But what happens when the court system, the physical court system, is no longer open for us, and it's closed the doors for the public that they cannot come in due to a pandemic, which all of us has faced over this last year. And people can't access justice. You know, someone who's dealing with their lives now, not unless there is an online means. And so that's one of the things that we really spent a lot of time focusing on at Matterhorn when we started this business. And it was kind of interesting, and I'm going to deal with a couple themes throughout this keynote here. But, you know, when you can't go to court, why do I have to come to court when I am in court? Judge Tabby in Washtenaw County, Michigan, he was listening to people in his courtroom say this. And this was about the time when our founder, Professor J.J. Prescott at the University of Michigan, came up with the idea to bring the court system processes online. And so we hooked up with several courts, and one of those was Judge Tabby's court in Washtenaw, in how we can help people deal with their online obligations without having to go to court. Now, initially, we were dealing with things like lost wages because you had to take the day off from work, transportation, childcare, or just those psychological issues associated with being scared to death to walk into the court and stand in front of a judge, all of the things that many of us have seen or experienced or have heard about. And so this was all in play come this year when the COVID-19 hit. And so as we look at trends and how things were happening by moving processes online prior to this year, we have seen really incredible increases of adoption, and people using online systems to increase access to their court, and in fact, open another door to their court. This, as we look at online processes, we have to consider other stakeholders, and other stakeholders include law enforcement around the country, includes prosecutors, city and county attorneys, public defenders, and other lawyers. These are obviously integral to our legal system. And looking at bringing your processes online, it's not just duplicating your process, but it's looking at the court as not just a building, looking at the court as access to justice, looking at the court another door to access to justice that may not be the front door or the side door or the door where you have to go through security. And so when we started this, we were working with a lot of different groups, a lot of different courts, and everyone's familiar with the National Center for State Court and IGIS and various groups, where we ended up really putting a definition around ODR, and it was meant to be very specific processes in the digital space to resolve your dispute or your case. But one of the things that we found, and we really look at some of the initial implementations that we have done with Judge Tabby's court and with other courts in the initial pilots that we did, all through some of the launches that we have done even this year, online case resolution has been one of the aspects of what makes sense to the public. ODR makes sense in certain instances and for certain types of processes. Calling it an online mediation is another term that's used. Online adjudication, online compliance, and we end up really looking at all types of ways. How does the public relate to your court and going online with your court? And so we really do see a range, and I know I only captured a few of them here as we look through this. And as we've been expanding from those initial pilots way back in 2014, and it seems like a long time ago now yet, and sometimes it feels just like yesterday, is that we started off in the area of courts in criminal traffic cases, and really expand into doing more complex cases, pleas, online arraignments, online criminal misdemeanors throughout the country, and then moving into civil court and then family court. And in civil court, working with the courts that are dealing with small claims, landlord-tenant, foreclosure, civil debt, as well as other types of debt and other business cases and such. And this group also expanded beyond the court, because when you're looking at pre-filing initiatives, you are looking at mediation centers, you're looking at law firms, you're looking at organizations that may have court-order directives to work with various parties, but you also have parties coming to you to resolve their case, get to an agreement, get to a settlement, and not have to go to court. In the area of family and domestic relations, we started off really looking at more on the compliance side of things, and people really fulfilling their child support obligations, as an example. Those who need to change their parenting time plan or their child support plan. Those are more of the post-decree type cases that we were initially involved in. And I really didn't think that we would be doing pre-decree cases. And in fact, we are in a variety of different courts, but really focused on not just divorce and dissolution. We're looking at a range of issues in pre-decree, which has been very exciting, because you are typically dealing with parties that do not want to meet, and having a remote resolution on these cases to proceed through a divorce or a paternity or whatever the case may be is an avenue to go. We also deal with ability to pay issues, and they seem to really span a lot of what we do across the spectrum of cases we're involved with, but it also helps with compliance and getting results online. And if you really allow people to come forward and voice they have an ability to pay on something, and then work with them on those payment plans and those obligations that they need to meet, but may need help in meeting them. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time here talking about, yes.
MJ, we've had a request that you hit the hide button on the americanbar.zoom.us as sharing your screen. Sometimes it's covering a slide. Thank you.
How's that?
Go ahead. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. I always forget to do that. Thank you. So when we're looking at online dispute resolution, we're looking at various steps and various stages as we go through this. And, you know, negotiation, escalation, mediation, and settlement are the stages that are typically talked about. And we'll, you know, obviously spend a little time there, but I really want to talk about those initial stages up front, where you're dealing with notice, response, and then the communication, which is ongoing throughout the process. And then really that last stage of measurement, which is an ongoing stage and initiative that is really important when you're looking at online dispute resolution. So when we look at notice, you know, this is done in so many different ways on the different implementations that we are involved with, from Michigan, New York, down south in Georgia, back up in Ohio, and you know, across the country in California. That this is an area of how do you reach people, how do you let them know? And in many cases, it is a summons is sent out to people, to the parties. They will go in and have an invitation to come online. When we have the ability to interface with people online via email or text, can we reach out to these people as a mediation center, as a law firm, as a court, to bring people into the system to solve their cases? So there's a lot of different ways of sending notice, making sure notice is done in a timely manner, and different vehicles and ways in which to do it. This is also very important when you're sending out to the respondent or to the defender, that they understand that this is an issue, especially if it's coming from the court, that they need to respond to. And you really have to make sure it comes across as coming from the court. There's so many things that are going on out there that, you know, can be scam, and you really don't want people ignoring something they need to pay attention to. When we really look at the communications, you know, once again, we are very used to electronic communications. And, you know, we end up doing a lot of notification via text to remind people of things, move people along, let people know that a notice has appeared, a vehicle to move them to register online. And in case of a lot of the court cases, but even some of the centers we work with, they have a filing process. And doing that online is a way to facilitate the filing process, whether it's registering, or whether it's responding, or even at the very end of the process, recording as well. When you get the response and you get into the system, you know, how do you start communicating, and how do you respond, and what information do you have to have available as you do these front steps, and understanding what is to come? How do you prepare for it. These are the things that are very important to do in dispute resolution when you're moving it into an online process. And sometimes we are working with mediators, but sometimes we're really looking at that initial stage of potentially a peer-to-peer negotiation between two parties. You may have a structured negotiation there where you are really prompting along steps to get them to resolution, especially financial resolution. And in other cases that you may be um, settling issue that has more than just, and being able to communicate back and forth. And oftentimes this step is an important step, especially in some of the court order mediation. We're finding that the parties have not even started to talk. They go late to court, and then one of the first things that they were in front of the judge would say, have you, tried to work this out? And oftentimes it is, no, we haven't tried to work it out. No, we have not even discussed this because of a variety of reasons. But oftentimes, as many of you know, it doesn't work, and you really need to escalate it. And that escalation can really take on different forms, all right? It can be escalated, in this case, in implementation, to a mediator. And so you have so many days in which to try to work it out amongst the two parties, or if there's multiple parties on each side, to work it out. The other way is that you can accelerate it to a mediator. If mediation is a part of the process and you really need to accelerate it and to a trial, one of the implementations that we see a lot of is that if you cannot negotiate it by a trial date, or in fact mediate it by a trial date, then you basically have to be there at that trial date. Sometimes they close down the day before, so the dockets can be set for the next day. But you basically have to handle all of this prior to your trial date, or accelerate into a trial or hearing.
Hey,
The
MJ, I'm so sorry.
process of mediation, most of you understand the process. Yes.
I think we might need to switch to the phone. It is very a little bit of interference, and I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but I want people to hear your voice clearly. Linda did just text you the password, the meeting.
I'll leave this screen up in mediation. Okay.
I guess you can say this is an escalation.
This is an escalation.
Yeah.
Well done. Well done. So let me go into, hopefully this works. Enter your meeting ID followed by pound. It's dialing in now. I don't know if I have a participant ID.
You need the passcode. I have.
All right. I need to switch out of here for a moment.
I see you. I'm going to allow you to talk. You should be able to talk now, MJ. You might need to unmute.
All right. Am I unmuted?
Yes. Excellent.
All right.
Sorry, everyone. Thank you, MJ. Thank you.
Everybody. All right. So One is we were in mediation, okay? So we've escalated it so you can hear me hopefully much better, and you need to bring in a mediator. Oftentimes, what we're starting to see, and I think it's more of the comfort people have with technologies like we're using right now, Zoom and others, that you can go from what we call an asynchronous environment, meaning it's like chat, it's like email. It doesn't have to happen real time. It can be real time, but moving to a synchronized environment or bringing in a visual and an audio component to it is an escalation path as well. And we're starting to see more of that as more people get used to these technologies. And this is one where we have an escalation with several of the centers and courts that we're working with. We're just implementing this now. So for those who are using Matterhorn, this will be available for you, where you need to create a remote meeting, which is like, I want to create a meeting now. Also schedule a remote meeting and share that information with the parties who need to be in that particular meeting. You also notice here is the information you need to share, and if you need to do sidebars, you can do them in this type of asynchronous environment here. Party 1 with the mediator, or party 2 with the mediator, so they can have dialogue that does not have the other party involved. And if this were the case, we'd be looking at party 2, if I'm talking to them with as a mediator. I would be I'd be talking to the tenant. I'd be talking to a potential funder. This is a landlord-tenant case, and there's a housing community potential funder that would be brought in to in an effort to not evict this particular tenant. So there's different means of escalating and having conversations, having sidebars, or even providing a remote session, a remote meeting within the sidebars. The other is settlement. And, you know, before I switch off of synchronized aspect of communication, is that when we are doing settlements and there's attorneys on both sides with a mediator, and so one of the areas to utilize a session like we're on right now, Zoom, is all three working together and putting together the agreement that you have attorney from party 1, attorney from party 2, plus the attorney mediator who's putting together the agreement. The other way is, you know, really uploading an agreement. I mean, oftentimes different parties have their own agreements, they have their own forms, they really do want to sign them and have an inked version, and those can be uploaded and shared, and even e-filed is appropriately if that makes sense for the particular case. But also there's agreements that can be signed and filled in online. They can be open-ended, they can be very specific forms that you may have for small claims judgments, dismissal forms, they may be for landlord-tenant, eviction cases and such, and all of those can be, if that makes sense for the application and the jurisdiction, to have those done all online, and in fact have all of those signed online as well, recorded, and then the various documents can be routed to the appropriate filings, as well as being printed, downloaded, and saved in all of those important aspects. So I'm going to move, and I'm hoping everyone can still hear me. And I'm going to really spend a little bit of time on outcomes. The measurement aspect of ODR has always been important to the Matterhorn team from day one. And we have been collecting a standard set of metrics across all of the different implementations, over 100 courts and centers that we're involved with now. And we're finding a really consistent number here. It's 39% or 40% as an average of people who have told us they would not have been able to resolve their case if it wasn't for an online option. And this has been a number that I've been always wowed at Now that we have COVID-19, that number I would imagine probably would be increasing over time. But we're also finding across the board it's saving time, not just for the court systems, but for the attorneys involved, for the various court staff, for the judges, and for the defendants and the offenders who come into the system. We're also finding that where there are fees and fines involved in cases, these are being fully paid off and fully closed, these cases, within 30 days. And it's a pretty consistent number that we're seeing across the board. We also ask those questions like, would you recommend doing this type of case online? And that's been consistently high, as well as, has my case been handled fairly? And that's a tough one, because if you don't like the outcome of your case, you may feel it was not treated fairly, but we do ask this question, and we do get consistently strong results in this space. This is, I'm sharing this slide. It's from a study that was done when we really first started. And what's pretty important to me about this study is it was across different courts. In this case, it happened to be Michigan. And we're really looking at case closure rates. And before you bring in an online system, you have different levels of efficiencies in the court. You have one here that it's a very efficient court. You have some that are less efficient. And this was at the particular point in time when we took this measurement. And then we brought in Matterhorn. And even the processes that were not involved with online dispute resolution were able to close faster. Those cases where closure was defined by payment, and you actually are closing them out in the case management. And so all cases were closing faster, which is very interesting, right? Because we were really initially just really focusing on measuring the orange bar here, and that is looking at cases that went through Matterhorn. And as you can see, there's a level of efficiency across all the courts when they're looking at these cases, and efficiency across all the courts that weren't Matterhorn as well. But the other fact here that I get really excited about is that it doesn't matter if the court, your community, in your neighborhood, your court that is servicing your jurisdiction is an efficient court, or at that particular time, or an inefficient court, you are able to have efficiencies across all of the courts. And not only are you increasing your access to justice, but you're increasing your efficiency as you access justice, which we think is very important and very powerful. Other metrics is when you look at access, is where are people reaching from to your systems that you are doing online dispute resolution or online case resolution with. And I'll show you a couple examples that are kind of interesting. We're working with Miami-Dade, and clearly most of their cases will be in Florida, as you can see here. Most of them will be in Miami, but you look around the surrounding areas, you see a lot of people looking and searching on their site from beyond the Miami-Dade county area. In fact, if you look across Florida, you can see, and hopefully this is enough contrast on your screens to see that variation, but across the country, different states of people accessing the system. Another set of stats that we compile, and of course we work with, have access to these dashboards. But one is in Miami-Dade, over half of the people accessing the system and doing searches and such are accessing it from their desktops, okay? We're seeing the more and more mobile users, and here we still have, over 40% mobile users, but this one has over 50% computer laptop or desktop users. If we look down at the orange chart here, what we're seeing is a diverse set of age groups that are really accessing the system. And this becomes important when we try to understand, hey, are we just hitting one demographic with respect to age? And here we're about a third people are hitting the system are 34 and under. You have another third that is, I believe, 50 and older, and then the other third is between there. So very interesting, and this was just from August 1st through today, in fact. So obviously it's data from yesterday, I'm assuming. And we look at another jurisdiction that we're working with in Texas, and you can see the diverse access once again, so that's nothing new there. But if you look at the access on device, it's almost 75% people accessing from their mobile phone, which is very interesting compared to what we just saw in Miami-Dade. So really paying attention to how people are accessing your dispute resolution system is very interesting. And the age of variations, they look about, similar, slightly different, but you still are getting the age range of people using the system online. We pay really close attention to what not only the end users are saying about the system, but what our customers who are offering the system through their court centers or firms. And we review these every Monday morning. We have a huddle and we look to see what is happening out there. And we hear, really positive results, which always make us feel really good. And if there are areas to improve, we look at that. And there are some things that come in through the channel that we want to make sure that the court sees or the center sees that they may not have noticed yet, even though they have access to all this information. But one of my favorite quotes, and then you may think, oh, well, maybe it's more funny or not, but the best government online tool I've ever used. And so well, maybe he's not ever used a good government online tool, so maybe it's not really meant to be a compliment, but in a way, that's one of my favorites. And that came in this year because I remember, or the end of last year, I remember forwarding it to the AOC down in Arkansas, because it was an Arkansas user who was commenting on that. There's also, things about, people who are using the system who are disabled, senior citizens using the system. And yes, we do worry about populations that may not be as technically savvy as other populations we have, but we also are finding that different populations have a harder time getting to courts, and having online options is helpful with that. When a lot of the courts closed their buildings to the public because of the pandemic, one was in Washington County here in Michigan, which is this particular court is just down the street from our offices, but they had already implemented online dispute resolution. And Lisa Fusick, who is the court administrator at the Washtenaw Court 14A, she works with Judge Tabby, who I talked about earlier. And, they couldn't have imagined not having worked with us prior to get their systems online when they had to close their doors to the public. So this was, pretty darn important from their perspectives. When we look at, what does this mean to attorneys and lawyers? And, one of the things is there are attorneys and lawyers who are, using our system, as part of their centers and their firms. But when we're dealing with cases in traffic and other criminal cases, having access to the system, if you're representing a party, is an important aspect to dealing with online dispute resolution or online case review cases. And we started this implementation with Lisa Fusick and Judge Tabby's court initially because they really wanted to not just have their pro se population come in through the online door, but also those who are represented by attorneys or if a public defender has been assigned to the case. It was very important to them to have that involvement. So they really did the initial work with us on bringing attorneys onto the system and having the logins and the access and making sure that the roles were set up appropriately as we work with attorneys in the dispute resolution world. We work with families. I kind of went through the types of cases that run through our system. And I'm not sure how this is going to work if we don't have good audio on my computer system. So I'm going to try this one audio video here, and if it doesn't work, we can make sure that you have the link so that you can hear it. So let me go on mute here.
We've had a long history of trying to enforce child support orders effectively, and often that results in a large number of what we call orders to show cause hearings, where people are summoned into court and they have to explain themselves to a judge as to why they have paid their child support obligations. And as a result of that, some people may go to jail. Some people may not show up and have bench warrants issued. Some people may bring in money and pay on the spot, and it resolves a hearing. But what always struck me is that on any given Friday morning when we schedule those, we have 100 to 200 people showing up in a lobby for what could have been taken care of through a phone call or through a computer application.
In the Matterhorn platform, what they allow us to do is to shoot out texts to people to say, you have not made payment on your obligation. You have not connected with us in over a month. You haven't made a payment in this long. Please connect with me. We have employment opportunities for you. We have a skills workshop that we can work with you on. We don't want to be a reactive court.
We want to reduce the number of show cause hearings so that we could free up more time for the judges in the courtroom for other cases that were pressing. We wanted to try to resolve the cases because our goal always is not to put people in jail. Our goal is to have child support orders properly enforced so that eventually that money gets to the kids and to the families that are going to benefit from it. So there's food on the table and there's a roof over their heads and clothes on their back. We really don't need to force people to come to court just for the sake of doing that. So we wanted to resolve the cases, and we also wanted to try to reduce the number of bench warrants that were issued on a regular basis.
Maybe before you couldn't connect with me because maybe I didn't have stable housing or stable employment or didn't have transportation, reliable transportation. And so because of these barriers, maybe the connection was more difficult, or the access to our house is more difficult on the Matterhorn. Even if you have multiple barriers, we normally can connect with you, and so to me that's positive.
We're better now than we were before because we're meeting these performance measures, and it's having a positive impact on our clients and a positive impact on the court in terms of our overall efficiency levels and how we're using our staff, and a positive impact for the county.
When I first started working for front of the court, we didn't have a Matterhorn, so it was a lot of the paper check-in where I would write the names down. People would come up and check the names off and see their clients.
Hey, MJ, it's not working.
I was probably a year and a half in when we started.
All right. Can you hear me now, Dunry?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So what we'll do is there's different stats that they talk about. That one you hopefully could hear some of it with Kevin Bowling and Matt Schmid and Rachel Russell. But we will make sure the links are on the presentation when we send it out. They're YouTube links, so you can publicly access those. Let me go back here. It'll make it easier on the technology side, not having to switch between all these different systems, that's for sure. And I'm not going to do the audio clip here, but we have a project that has been very meaningful and very important to several of us. Jason Swartz with Dawn Farm, which is, it really helps people in the community with rehabilitation and working with the court system. He was presenting in, I forgot exactly where the presentation was, but really talking about the meaning of the system and people, helping people who have obligations. In this case, they had family court obligations and outstanding child support payments, and being able to hop on an online system because they are in fear of being thrown in jail because of the outstanding obligations, reaching out to the court, and then as a result of reaching out to the court, getting on a payment plan, meeting the obligation, not letting, in this case it was Bob, shy away from the obligation, but really making it work and moving forward with his life, and being able to get a job, and being able to, have checks, credit checks and other checks run. And now he's a very, active part of the programs that happen to be programs that Dawn Farm puts on and really helps people with. And Lisa Fusick, once again, working in Judge Tabby's court, same thing, of different scenarios where people ending up with driving with license suspended and other aspects of not being able to get their license, really working online, because how can you actually go to court to your case if you don't have transportation, you don't have someone nearby who can drive you, or you may not have the funds to actually get to court. So they really talk through some really nice scenarios, and we'll make sure that that is available to you as well. The outcomes that Kevin Bowling was referring to is that his community has been able to collect over 22% more child support. And this is a year-over-year analysis that we do with them. They have almost 30% fewer hearings. And, to me, an incredibly important stat from a community aspect and cost savings, even this, not just flat out ROI, but your social ROI as well when it comes to fewer warrants being issued. So really strong numbers that come out of this particular court. And really, we've done an ongoing study here, but the results are similar in the other jurisdictions that have family online dispute resolution and online case resolution as well. Another video in the small claims case space that I think would be a really great one for you to listen to. Alex Sanchez heads up the small claims group in Columbus, Ohio, in Franklin County, and Veronica Cravener works with him. They have they are the mediation staff, and they can handle many cases as a small mediation staff in a very big court because they handle it online. And they really kind of talk through that, as well as hearing from their city attorney of Columbus, who handles a lot of income tax, city income tax cases that he brings in from the small claim side as the plaintiff, and how those cases are all resolved online, which is pretty exciting. And, hearing what people have to say about coming online and not having to do this and come to court to do this. There's a couple other metrics, and we'll make sure you have this link as well. And Alex has really kept track of this, and he shares all his information, but he's really looking at ways to increase agreements and dismissals that are coming out of the work that he does within his mediation center. And we do look at how often do people access systems outside of the normal court hours. Now, this becomes a little different in the world with a pandemic, but it's a stat that we think is very important to look to see when people can access the court outside of business hours. And this is the link for those who can see it here on the Franklin County data project that Alex keeps up to date with his information, and knowing that ODR cases have a significantly higher percentage of positive case deposition, and compared to his non-mediation referrals and his court referred mediation. And when we look about what what this means to attorneys, just like I had mentioned in representation for parties on the criminal and traffic side of things, the representation for party in the civil side of things, and having attorneys being able to log on and represent parties, being able to have side channels and sidebars, conversations or information exchange with their parties that they're representing, but also working toward agreements together, and or the cases of centers or firms who can offer online dispute resolution as a service. So there's things beyond just the court aspect when it comes to attorneys having their own systems in which they are doing mediation and such. When we look at overall numbers, and I'll just go through these very, very quickly because we want to make sure we have some time for questions. Efficiency is a metric that, you know, you can argue is ODR all about efficiency? It's not all about efficiency, but efficiency is important when you're talking about access to justice and efficient justice. Customer satisfaction, we know, is very important to those users of our system, and the ability to do recommendations. And, you know, Judge Tabby, you know, he started off, and my first conversation with Judge Tabby when we started the company was when I was out sailing. It was the summer at the time, and I picked up the phone I was getting a signal in Lake Michigan, if you can believe that. And the judge saying, yes, we want to get rolling with the system. You know, if people coming into my court that said, you know, saying that, hey, we cannot access the system. We can't access the court. Here I'm in court. Why am I here? Why can't I do this online? And he really strongly felt that we were not providing justice system to people, and really was pushing the cause. And we've spent some time talking about different aspects of our work over the years with him and other courts. And one of the things he says is, why not us? You know, why don't we start with us? And, you know, he and a couple other courts in Michigan is where a lot of the work that we've been involved with began. And I think it's an important question for all of us. Like, why wouldn't we want to address access online to help more people, especially during a pandemic? And so as we look at what this person is doing here on her cell phone, what this person is doing on the phone or the computer, or maybe both, who knows? You have people here looking at their phone and their devices. You know, what do you think they're doing? And, you know, I would like to think they're actually resolving their case online, their dispute online. And that's what they're doing as they handle other aspects of their lives online. And we are working with over 100 different centers and courts and firms all over the country. It's expanding weekly, and we have over 110,000 cases that have been resolved on the Matterhorn platform, and that's obviously expanding daily, hourly as we speak. So it's been very exciting to be part of this ability to offer another door to justice and resolution of cases. And so as we move forward, Dunri, I'm hoping that you're getting in chat some questions that I'm hoping I can answer.
Yes, we have a couple questions in the chat. One of them is a very practical question, which is Matterhorn available in California, and if so, where?
Yeah, so right now we are working with the Center for Conflict Resolution, Center for CCR, Center for Conflict Resolution for Peace, down in the Los Angeles area. They are just launching, which is pretty exciting. So that is available, and I don't know how large their jurisdiction is, if it's outside of LA or it's just in the Los Angeles County, which is very large. And we're also we'll be launching shortly with San Joaquin Court in the traffic area. So those are the two areas that we're working in California right now, and we are, you know, talking to, and hopefully we'll be talking to many more. But yes.
A question that may be on many people's minds are, what are the various roles for attorneys in these online processes?
Yeah, so I'm going to off of share. So when it comes to attorneys, if there's a center or a court that you are working with, do you, you can represent your client through the online system. So that is one interaction that takes place. The other, if you are offering mediation negotiation services, being able to have a platform in which you offer these services is another way to do it. If your client is dealing with an issue in a court that's they're being arraigned on a criminal misdemeanor, or they are in the process of dealing with a criminal misdemeanor, there are courts that are utilizing Matterhorn to arraign and resolve that issue online as either a private attorney representing that client or a public defender who's been assigned to work with that client. So there's quite a few roles, and I think we're going to see that expanding beyond the majority of people using the system are pro se.
We just got a note from Javon Hicks, who we know from her work with Matterhorn in Georgia. She mentioned that an attorney can serve as a mediator as well.
Thank you. How could I forget that, Javon? Thank you for keeping me honest on that.
Yes, thank you, Javon. So that's a great segue into another question, which is, do attorneys write up the agreements?
You know, I'm thinking in most of ours, the mediator is an attorney and the mediator is writing up agreements. Mm-hmm. As I had mentioned also, if the attorney has certain formats or really does require ink, that they have documented their agreements and then they're uploaded into the system. So the answer is typically yes on that.
Sydney Kanazawa is asking, what is the cost of the system to the courts or to parties?
Yeah, so there's clearly different structures where oftentimes, if you look at what the state of Michigan has done with MyResolve, they are not charging the end user to utilize the system. And that is representative of a lot of courts throughout the country. There are those who charge a fee, an end user fee for the system. And so those would go through the court, or those fees would be coming right in directly to Matterhorn. So we see it done different ways, from free to small fees. And what we typically do is set it up as a subscription, that an annual subscription for the court or the centers, and they pay so much per month or per year to utilize the service, and we base that on the volume that is going through the system.
So I guess the quick answer is it depends, yeah.
Yeah, it depends. And, you know, we've always been of the mind, and those who, work with Matterhorn know this, is that we really want the system to be affordable. So when a fee does have to go to the end user, we want to make sure that the fees in which we would be charging the court in the first place would be reasonable, that the court can either absorb the fee if it works for that jurisdiction, or if they can't, then it's a small fee that goes to the end user.
Switching topics more from the technical and the funding to the process, how are people moved along through the process to get resolution?
Yeah, so if you think in terms of workflows, and you think about the beauty of a computer system is it can move through workflows. passing along the appropriate information, the appropriate roles who can access different things along the workflow, and different people need to respond differently through that. So we will move people through the process utilizing emails and texts for people to, hey, come back, you need to deal with this now before time's expired, or someone just reached out to you, you need to respond. So those are different ways in which we move it. And then once signatures are done, for example, it's moved to the workflow state now to be filed with the court would be another example. So there's a whole workflow engine that moves agreements and moves people through the process behind the scenes. I hope that helps.
I think that's yeah, it's helpful. One more if we have time. John Leiter has asked, when is Matterhorn not the right fit for online mediation? And the questions, he may be potentially personal injury, potentially business disputes. Do you have a sense of, and maybe just a broader question of how you judge, when to deploy online dispute resolution, for which case types? Where do you start, maybe, is a good question.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's actually applicable to cases that you have mentioned, in addition to many more, but it has to be right for the jurisdiction and for the stakeholders. And the stakeholders really have to be bought into wanting to bring an online capability to their constituents. And to me, that is the underlying factor, not as much the case type. Now, as you get more complexity in the case types, you have to make sure that the online system can handle those complexities. We've had to expand the capabilities of our system. I think I know we're expanding it weekly with each sprint that we have to make sure that we are addressing some of the things that do come up as we deal with more complex cases. So it's a great question, and I think that there are some cases that won't fit based on the more of the stakeholders and the really looking at what makes sense to move online for my community and for my jurisdiction and for my stakeholders.
Okay, well, thank you, MJ Dunry. This is Linda Seeley.
Thank you
again.
so much.
We've kind of run out of time here, but I want to say thank you so very much. We really appreciate it. For those of you who would be willing to do so, there is a link to the evaluation of the session in the chat. You can also access the evaluation back on the hub. The next thing up, we've got our exhibit hall time. So please go back over to the hub, check on the exhibit hall, take some time to look around, make some appointments, and thank you so much, everybody, for being here today. Really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you.